You're sitting at dinner with your family right now, or you did earlier today, or you will tonight. Nothing special about it. Someone complains about work. Someone reaches for more bread. Ordinary noise. Now imagine that dinner is the last one your entire species will ever have. Not your family, not your tribe. Every single Neanderthal left on Earth is in that cave with you, and none of you know it's the end. That's not a metaphor. That actually happened somewhere. One group, one night, was the last of them. And the strange part is, nobody in that cave felt the weight of it. There was no final battle, no announcement, no last stand. Just a normal evening that happened to be the final one, in a story that had already been ending for thousands of years without anyone noticing. For over 300,000 years, Neanderthals ran Europe and Western Asia. They weren't a footnote. They were the dominant human species on the continent for longer than Homo sapiens has existed as a species at all. They hunted animals twice their size at close range with wooden spears. They controlled fire. They buried their dead. Some evidence suggests they even placed flowers in graves. These weren't the dim brutes from an old textbook illustration. They were tough, intelligent, and built like tanks. Wide chests, thick bones, faces engineered to warm freezing air before it hit their lungs. And then, within a few thousand years, a blink of time compared to the 300,000 they'd already survived, they were gone. Not one group, every family, every cave system, every hunting band scattered across an entire continent, all following the same slow trajectory toward the same ending. So the real question isn't what killed the Neanderthals. It's why did every single population, isolated from each other by hundreds of miles, all run out of road at roughly the same time? Let's start with the last known place they existed, Gorham's Cave, on the Rock of Gibraltar, right at the southern tip of Spain. Archaeologists have found tools there dating to around 40,000 years ago, some of the youngest confirmed Neanderthal artifacts anywhere. Gibraltar sits at the very edge of Europe, a dead end jutting into the sea. And that detail matters more than it sounds like it should. Because by that point, Neanderthals weren't spread across a continent anymore. They were being pushed into corners, isolated pockets, cut off from each other, running out of places left to retreat to. Gibraltar wasn't just where the last ones happened to be. It was where the map ran out. So picture that family, not a symbolic one, an actual small group, maybe 15 to 20 people, tucked into a cave mouth overlooking the sea. They still knew how to hunt. They still knew how to make fire. They still had everything that had kept their ancestors alive for hundreds of thousands of years. But something around them had changed, and it wasn't something you could fight with a spear. The first pressure was climate. The world Neanderthals evolved for was cold, stable, predictable. Their bodies were built for it. Compact frames that conserved heat, powerful builds suited to ambush hunting in dense forest and tundra. But around 40,000 years ago, the climate started swinging harder and faster than it had in a long time. Warm periods and cold snaps flipped back and forth on timescales too short for ecosystems to adjust. The animals Neanderthals depended on, mammoths, woolly rhinos, reindeer, shifted their ranges or crashed in number. A hunting strategy perfected over hundreds of millennia suddenly didn't match the world it was built for. Then there was competition. Around 45,000 years ago, Homo sapiens started moving into the same territory Neanderthals had held for hundreds of thousands of years. And here's the part that doesn't get said enough. Sapiens weren't stronger. They weren't smarter in any way that shows up in the fossil record. But they had one enormous advantage. They were connected. Homo sapiens lived in wider social networks, groups that traded with other groups, hundreds of miles apart, sharing tools, techniques, mates, food during hard seasons. If one band had a bad year, another band, 3 valleys over, could carry them through it. Neanderthals mostly didn't do this. Their groups were smaller, more isolated, more self-contained. That's not a character flaw, it's just how they lived. But it meant that when things got hard, there was no wider net to catch them. And DNA tells the rest of the story quietly. Genetic material recovered from Neanderthal remains shows strikingly low diversity, the genetic signature of populations that were already shrinking, already inbreeding within small isolated groups, long before the final disappearance. Some individuals show signs consistent with the health effects of a shallow gene pool. This wasn't a species cut down in its prime. It was a species that had been quietly narrowing for generations. So back to that family in the cave at Gibraltar. They weren't starving in front of your eyes. There's no evidence of a sudden catastrophe, no mass graves, no signs of a final massacre. What the evidence actually points to is something slower and honestly more unsettling. A gradual squeeze, fewer options each generation, smaller hunting grounds, fewer neighboring groups to exchange people and knowledge with, a shrinking world closing in from every direction at once until there was nowhere left to walk to. We know something else too, something that complicates this even further. Neanderthals and Homo sapiens didn't just compete, they interbred. Genetic evidence recovered from ancient remains and carried in the DNA of people alive right now shows that for a window of time, the two species lived close enough and long enough to have children together. Most people alive today outside of Africa carry somewhere between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA. Some genes tied to skin, hair, and immune response trace directly back to them. That changes the ending, because it means the last Neanderthals weren't necessarily wiped out. In some very real sense, part of them didn't disappear at all. Their genes are sitting inside people reading this right now, in a system, a bloodstream, a body that has no idea it's carrying a piece of a species that supposedly went extinct 40,000 years ago. So what actually happened in that final cave? If there even was one final cave, one final family. The honest answer is we don't know the specific night. Nobody found a skeleton with a sign around its neck saying last one. What we found instead is quieter and somehow heavier. A gradual thinning of the archaeological record. Tools becoming rarer, occupation layers becoming shorter. Cave sites used less and less frequently until one day, the evidence just stops. No fanfare, no single catastrophe, just absence where there used to be presence. Try sitting with that family for a second. They didn't know they were the end of anything. As far as they were concerned, they were doing what their parents did, what their grandparents did, what every Neanderthal had done for 300,000 years. Wake up, check the weather, send someone out to check the traps, argue about where to hunt, put another log on the fire. Nobody in that cave was thinking about legacy. They were thinking about dinner, and that's maybe the part that should sit with you the longest. Extinction from the inside doesn't look like extinction. It looks like an ordinary Tuesday. There's no music swelling, no sense of finality. Just a smaller group than last year, a little less certainty about where the next meal is coming from, a slightly quieter cave than the one their parents grew up in. The end of an entire branch of humanity happened so slowly that nobody living through it could have known it was happening at all. Meanwhile, a few valleys away, or maybe a few hundred miles away, a group of Homo sapiens was doing almost exactly the same thing, waking up, checking traps, arguing about the hunt. The only difference was if their winter went badly, they had somewhere else to turn. A cousin's camp 2 rivers over. A trading partner they hadn't seen in a year but who owed them a favor. That thin, invisible web of connection was the entire difference between a species that kept going and one that quietly ran out of road. There's something almost uncomfortable about how ordinary the ending was. We tend to want extinction to look dramatic. A last stand, a final battle, a moment you could point to and say, that's when it ended. But the Neanderthals didn't get a moment like that. They got tens of thousands of years of slowly shrinking margins until one unremarkable evening, in a cave overlooking the sea, a family went to sleep the same way they always had. And there simply wasn't another morning where their kind woke up anywhere else on Earth. They didn't fail because they were weak. They survived ice ages, hunted animals that could kill a person with one motion, raised children in some of the harshest environments humans have ever lived in, for 300,000 years. They lost, if that's even the right word, because the world changed faster than their small, isolated way of living could adapt to, right as a more connected, more networked cousin species showed up next door. And in the end, they didn't fully disappear anyway. Their tools are still in the ground, their bones are still being studied, and their genes are still here, quietly, in the DNA of billions of people who will never know exactly which ancestor carried it forward, or what that last ordinary night in that last ordinary cave actually looked like.